Today, we are here to talk about how to navigate this digital minefield that we find ourselves in the year 2024 with our families, with our children, with ourselves, even. And some of the impacts of gaming and social media and other types of digital technologies on our functioning. If you have any questions today, please put them in the chat. I will periodically take a look at the chat if I can, and I have saved a period at the end so that we can discuss all questions that come in. If I don't respond to your question during the talk, it may be because I have addressed that later on in the presentation. I'm also going to keep the chat up, so give me a moment to locate that. So recently, about maybe 6 months ago, I came into the living room and found my daughter playing this game. This is called Power Wash Simulator. It's exactly what you think it is. She was power washing a fence in the video game. And I said to her, we have a power washer outside and a really dirty picket fence. You want to go do it for real? And, she laughed and said, no, thank you. And a few months later, I saw her playing a different game in which she was loading clothes into a washing machine for points. Again, I offered to let her do the real thing. Again, she declined. This is a sort of a typical paradigm that we see. Children engaging in these kinds of digital entertainment opportunities. And I think the point that it really drives home for me is how ubiquitous this type of technology is. And that digital media is really a part of life. And so today we're going to talk about really how to manage it from a number of different angles. The main point that I'd like to kind of get across today is that we can't choose whether or not digital media is part of our lives. If we're in this society, it is a part of our lives. And really, we have to figure out how to make the best use of it. So we're going to talk, this is the agenda for today. We're going to first talk a little bit about some of the positives, the upsides of digital media use. And I tend to be a little more positive than maybe the typical psychologist. So I do want to discuss that in more than just a cursory way. I also want to talk, of course, about some of the risks of digital media use, although I think that you probably have heard a lot about them. And then maybe what a lot of you are here for is actually what can we as parents do about these issues. When I use the term digital media, I'm referring to all of the following. I'm referring to any kind of technology that we call screens, right? Television, smartphones, iPads, tablets, whatever. Talking about social media, TikTok, Instagram, and so forth. Streaming media, that would be YouTube, Netflix, Twitch, anytime children are watching videos online, basically. And of course, video games and whatever else I might have missed that is not captured above that children would be doing on a screen aside from educational sorts of endeavors. We're not going to talk about that today, although we do know that a lot of the educational system has adopted digital media as part of the curriculum. We're going to talk about all that extracurricular stuff. Okay. So we're going to start off by talking about some of the upsides of digital media, because there are some. And I think that you won't get any judgment from me today if your children use a lot of digital media, because my children do as well. So instead of bemoaning this, what we're really going to do is try to emphasize the positives that are there and minimize the impacts that this may have, that these sorts of endeavors may have otherwise for your children. So of course, there are a lot of downsides of social media we could talk about later, but how many of you are connected with friends that you would never be in touch with if not for social media? Part of what fueled the spread of social media in the first place, with Facebook being one of the early sort of pioneers in this sort of connecting the world, is this idea of staying in touch with people you would otherwise lose touch with, getting back in touch with people, shrinking the world in a good way, being able to have friends all over the world. Um, Another part of this whole social media thing that we actually like is when positive things get spread through social media, whether it's awareness of important causes or sending encouragement to other people. Um, there are a lot of positives that have come out of social media, probably for most people in here in one way or another. Of course, we know that there are educational opportunities as well as easy access to information. Not all of it good, right? But there are some benefits there. And as we know that the social media platforms have allowed people who would not otherwise have a voice to be heard. And if your child were to start a business baking cookies or walking dogs, the platform would give them a way to outreach and let people know about their new business or their new rock band that they just joined or whatever in a way that might not have been possible. So we know that social media has its upsides, and I want to talk a little bit about gaming because I think that gaming is one where a lot of parents have been pulling their hair out trying to help their children navigate gaming. But I want to remind you that video games are not inherently a bad thing, right? It's just a medium, just like any other medium, books, movies. It's just a medium, and new media is always demonized by some people until it becomes mainstream, whether it's the printing press or those moving picture shows in the theaters. There are good books and there are bad books, right? And so when we ask, are video games bad for our children? It's like asking, are books bad for our children? Except there are a lot of educational, excellent books. Sure. However, there are a lot of terrible books, and there's a lot of books that I would not want my child to go anywhere near. And so, just like that, there are upsides and downsides of video games. And I think we should talk about those as well so that you can feel sometimes a little bit better about this activity in moderation that children might be doing. And it's important to make this distinction between single player and multiplayer video games, not because one is better than the other or worse than the other or more meritorious, but just because they serve somewhat different functions in the life of a kid. So single player games are, of course, the ones that children enjoy solo. You can play them by yourself. You can have fun on your own. You can give yourself some kind of challenge, just like you were engaging in any other kind of hobby. You can build critical thinking skills and all these kinds of hand-eye coordination, all that. And then don't forget that single player video games have this fill the same role that movies or books do sometimes. The idea of artistic or narrative experiences that a person can enjoy on their own that are no worse than any other type of medium. So, when I was a kid, I came up playing this game. The Secret of Monkey Island was this very funny game where you sort of picked up items and solved puzzles and talked with people, and it was ridiculous and it was hilarious. There's a recent game. This one's called Venba, in which a South Indian family immigrates to Canada and tries to navigate the kind of multi-generational assimilation processes, and the storytelling is told largely through cooking South Indian recipes as a sort of award-winning game here. Non-violent, lovely story-heavy game. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's this game, The Last of Us, which is there's two in the series now, and these are post-apocalyptic, sort of violent zombie games that nevertheless have such a strong storytelling to them that HBO recently made a series and really didn't change all that much about the way the story was told. So any of these types of games, yes, they have their downsides as compared to reading a good educational book, but they also have a lot of merit as well on their own. Then, of course, we have multiplayer games, and local multiplayer is by that I mean the games that you would sit on the couch with somebody else and play, with a friend or with your family member. And there's a lot of fun to be had here as well. This is just like playing ping pong or something like that. You sit with somebody, you have fun, you laugh, do it at parties. It's a good thing to do. And some of my favorite memories of hanging out with my daughter have been playing a game like this Nintendo game, just me and her, and you know, I'm Luigi and she's the Luigi, the green one, and the gooey one, and you know, we have a lot of fun. So these are great experiences that can be bonding experiences with family, if you allow them to be. They don't just have to be a child shut up in their room, far away from you. And then when the other type of gaming that a lot of parents have seems like the most challenge with, are online multiplayer games. And again, these are not inherently bad. In some ways, they are great. They allow children to hang out with other people, with friends, oftentimes people that they know from, you know, school or the outside world, or you know, sometimes meeting new people, meeting strangers. And you know, playing in this space is analogous to, you know, going out to meet your friends to play some soccer outside, or going, you know, cruising the streets, you know, if you're a teenager just driving around. I mean, these are just ways to hang out. Now, is it inherently any worse than meeting up in a mall parking lot after dark and drinking beers? Some people say yes, some people say no. It really does depend. But in and of itself, these are just sort of pastimes that the kids use. And the social aspect is a big part of why people enjoy them. And I think that that's really worth keeping in mind. To be sure, there's plenty to hate about these games, in particular, these two games, but we can come to that in a little bit. Just want to take a second here to check the chat. Um, so I'd like to talk next about the cons of digital media, but I want to sort of emphasize just the point here that there are many great opportunities for connection. And that's been the theme of our parenting series this semester. The idea of children connecting with other kids, yes, but also an opportunity for connection with you, their parents, or with friends in the outside world. And I want to come back to that at the end of this talk as we discuss some of the ways that we can emphasize these aspects of digital media and try to minimize the risks and challenges from the other side. So let's talk about that now. I think that we know what's wrong with social media, but here's just some of the problems in a nutshell. The idea of social comparison. Imagine that our minds have a particular finite number of people that we're sort of designed to spend time around. Science has shown it's around 100 or 120 people. Like, that's how much our brains were sort of evolved to manage at one time. That's sort of the size of an ancestral human extended kin group. And those are all the people that we know, except for outside tribes and so forth. And that's what our brains are really designed to handle. Okay. Now you take that brain, and you know, over the course of however many tens and hundreds of thousands of years, we have this same brain that's changed a little bit, but not significantly. And now we can compare ourselves to tens of thousands of people or millions of people, depending on how fast we scroll through social media and traditional media for that matter. And we can look at people and we can negatively compare ourselves on every dimension that we possess to somebody else who's better than us. And that is not something that humans were designed to handle. So we can look at someone and say, that person's more muscular than me. That person's taller than me. That person's better looking. That person has more hair than me. Most people have. That person is having a better time. That person has more friends. And so we can get into this spiral where we are only comparing ourselves negatively against others. And our brains are just cannot handle that, and our children's brains cannot handle that. There's been this trend since around 2005 when social media really took off of these increasing rates of distressing symptoms among youth and teenagers. And it's thought that this social media environment that we're in has a lot to do. So just a couple of numbers here from literature cited in a U.S. Surgeon General report from a couple of years ago. 46% of youth that was surveyed said 46%, almost half, say social media makes them feel worse about their body image. So that's almost half of people on social media. 40% said neutral, neither here nor there, and only 14% said it makes them feel better about themselves. So a plurality of people, people say this is making me feel worse about how I look. Children and teens who spend over 3 hours a day on social media, and that is a lot of them. And again, there is absolutely no judgment on any of you as parents if that's your kid, because it is most kids in society spending a huge amount of time on this. But children and teens who spend over 3 hours a day on social media have a doubled risk of mental health issues such as anxiety and depression for the reason that I just mentioned. Roughly 2/3, that's 64% of adolescents report that they are often or sometimes exposed to hateful content that could be racist, misogynistic, or otherwise aggressive kinds of content. And we know that obviously, even if something is not directly hateful or racist, does not mean that's something that we want our children looking at. Not only do you have that, but you've got the self-perpetuating bubble that people get themselves in via social media by liking the things that they agree with and disliking or hiding the things that they disagree with, and it sort of kind of radicalizes people toward their pre-existing position farther in the direction that they had already chosen.
Dr. Glass, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I can't hear you. The audio's been in and out, and I put it in the chat. I can't hear any of your stats. I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you for letting me know. Give me one moment, and I'd like to try to solve this. If I stand here, if I sit here, is this okay?
That seems to be okay, Dan. I think it's the moving back and forth that is causing the challenge.
I understand. I think
I
think the microphone is not all it's cracked up to be here. Please don't feel bad about jumping in, and please feel free to do it again if the audio fades again. So 46% of children who use social media say that it makes them feel worse about their body image. Children and teens who spend over 3 hours a day on social media have a doubled risk of mental health issues, such as anxiety and depression. And roughly 2/3 of adolescents, that's around 64%, are often or sometimes exposed to hateful content. We also know that sleep is impacted, and not just that you get less sleep if you're up late on social media, but also that there is a reduced quality of sleep once you are asleep due to the blue wavelengths of light from the screens, as well as whatever other kinds of psychological effects that you might have had conferred to you as a result of comparing yourself negatively. And of course, there is this potential for being bullied by peers that does not go away once you go home, like it used to before social media. The idea that you can never escape the bullying. You go home, you turn on your phone, and people are still messing. This is a graphic that I really like. Remember that with social media, our children often only see other people's highlights. Right? This person having a great time on vacation. This person has a really happy family. This person's eating great food, going on a date. Look, they go on dates every night because look how many dates they're on, and they're all dressed up. Of course, there's a self-selection to what people share on social media, and we all know that, but we don't always think of it as we're looking through other people's highlight reels in life. I've made a conscious. Oh, please.
I was merely going to say, Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt you. The audio is still fading in and out. And I'm troubleshooting based on where you are. It seems like if you are closer to your computer, the audio seems to work. And if you even move just a few inches further away, it does seem to fade out.
I understand. There might be a issue with audio levels. Did anything change just now when I
Right
clicked
now,
on
you sound perfect, clear and loud.
clear as a bell? All right. Yes. I I will keep still. And again, somebody please feel free to jump in if we're having issues. I believe that there's a issue with the microphone levels on this new computer. So I've made a conscious decision not to focus too much with this presentation on the scary stuff. But I wanted to just talk about it for a few moments so that we recognize that these are real issues that are happening. And these are problems that our children are managing oftentimes well and oftentimes not so well. And they are leading to this epidemic of distress in our society. So let's talk about some of the downsides of video gaming that I think that a lot of you already know about, which is why you might be here today. Of course, there's the potential for addiction. Online multiplayer gaming seems to be especially addictive in the teen, young, the preteen and teen population that we work with. Something about the idea of it's this open-ended kind of experience that never ends. With single player gaming, oftentimes you go through a story and then you come to the end of the story and you put the game down. I beat the game, right? Or you play the game for a while, you get tired of the game, you go on to another game. But with multiplayer gaming, there is a tendency for people to have difficulty turning to their saying to their friends, "I'm sorry, I have to go now," right? Or saying, "I'm not going to log on tonight because I have some homework to do." And these lead to the kinds of challenges that a lot of you face as parents, where there's a push pull of for the child of I want to have a social life, and my social life revolves largely around gaming, and yet I want to have a life, and I want to do well at school, and I want to be with my family, and oftentimes the gaming wins out. We also know that there are these mental health risks associated with not the gaming itself, but the sedentary nature of playing video games and the isolation from real life social interactions that it can bring with it. And so I like to think about that as being the main issue rather than the video game itself, is the way that people tend to play video games when they're especially engaging in either solo or online multiplayer gaming, where they're kind of separated from usually the other members of the family or their friends in person. And then again, I don't have to tell most of you that there are these behavioral issues that happen around setting limits around video games. The idea of, okay, it's time to transition from the video game to do something else, and kid doesn't want to do it, and it causes fights. And we can talk a little bit about that. But I do want to let you know that there's another talk that I did that I'm going to share the link of on really how to manage that issue. And then sometimes kids spend money in the video game, whether they bought the game or whether the game was free to play. They could sometimes spend money in the game, and the term microtransactions means that it's an additional thing that you purchase in the game. It's often a cosmetic thing. It makes your character look different. Sometimes it affects the gameplay, so you can play the game more effectively. But micro implies that they're small, and they're not always small. Sometimes kids can spend staggering amounts of money on free-to-play games. And children who have ADHD or
other executive functioning or impulse control issues are especially vulnerable to these two downsides of gaming for obvious reasons, right? Whether it's the control that's not quite there to say I shouldn't buy this thing that I'm spending too much money, or whether it's the ability to transition. Sometimes children just have difficulty with that thing. There's this other idea of, and I think this is what sort of the more classic view of video games has, was, I'd say historically, of video games as sort of empty calorie junk food. And I think that there is still some merit to that. Some games are devoid of true nutrition, so to speak, and are just time wasters. Some of you feel like every video game is a time waster. To me, I tend to think about, well, potentially, but is every movie a time waster? Some more than others. I put this one on here because it's a game that many adults play, and it's known specifically for its addictive hook, and it's got candy right in the name. Okay, so I think the word saga here is being used very generously. Don't get confused into thinking you're playing some sort of game with an epic storyline with all this kind of deep lore and heroic deeds. You're just playing an endless game that's really the gaming equivalent of pure sugar, and it was very specifically designed to be addictive in a real way. I'm not just saying this is the only game that's like that. A lot of games that that kids play are like this as well, and a lot of the games that have some upsides like that social connection also do have this quality. Most of them do to some extent. And I wanted to have a section of its own for this question. This deserved its own section here. Do video games make children, sort of otherwise non-violent children, more violent? This has been a question that has been of concern to parents and policymakers since the early days of video gaming becoming a mass market concern, let's say the 1980s, right? Late 70s, early 80s. And these are the questions here, right? Does it make you more violent? Does it reduce empathy? Is there a greater risk of gun violence? And I understand where these concerns are coming from. And there's been tons of research over the decades, over and over again. And there are individual studies that find some findings like people who play violent video games are more likely to punish other people in a very contrived experiment by blasting a loud like air horn at them or something like that. But when you ask this question, is there a causal relationship between video games making children more violent? The answer is it just, over time and time again of these studies, it just does not show up, this causal relationship. But, and by the way, this was one of the early video games that caused a panic in the early 90s. This video game series, Mortal Kombat, is still going on today, and the violence in the games today make this look quaint by comparison. The sort of undead demon blowing fire at the other guy and burning him and all this kind of thing. And despite some of this over-the-top violence, it's not that video games make otherwise non-violent children violent, but violent people are drawn to violent media of all kinds. And if your child is highly fixated on disturbing or violent media, it can be revealing of existing risk factors for violence. So I wouldn't recommend anybody letting their impressionable or high-risk child dwell on any kind of violent media, whether it's movies or video games or anything else for that matter. But you have to know your child and use your discretion with this. If you were asked the question, is it a great thing for my child to play sort of gory, disgusting video games with terrible content? Like, no, I think that there are other ways that your child might be better spending their time. But if you ask, is it going to make my good little kid into a monster? The research seems to show, thankfully, that it does not. So there are pros and cons of digital media, but this is a trade-off that we have to accept if we want our children to have a typical social life in our society in 2024. It's too late for our society to opt out of this. The choice has been made for us. So what can we do about this? This is going to seem maybe a little bit like I'm like a broken record here, and I'm going to say this a bunch of times starting right now. The biggest way to manage this is to be proactive and have proactive conversations with your child about this. And I'll give you some examples of what that could look like. But here's some things to keep in mind. Having conversations about digital media use before they have become a problem is a really great thing. And if your children already have a high level of digital media use that is a problem, it's not too late, right? But you can have a proactive conversation before worse problems arise, and you might be able to solve a lot of problems by opening dialogue with them. But there are certain ways to do it and certain ways that might be less effective. So think about two different ways of interacting with a child. Let's call them connections versus corrections. And a connection is any kind of positive, affiliative conversation where you are talking with your child and they are talking with you. Maybe you're having a good time together without talking. That's a connection. Maybe you are giving them praise for something that they've done well, and it's genuine, and they are happy that they are being praised by you. These are connections, and that is like depositing money into a bank account. And then the other kind of interaction, what we call corrections, are criticism, prompting, telling children what to do, talking at them. And it's not that corrections are bad. Corrections are like withdrawing money from a bank account. We have to withdraw money from a bank account, and we have to tell our children sometimes what to do. Tim, put down that vase. Johnny, don't throw potatoes at your sister. These are important things to do. It's not that corrections are bad. It's that when we end up with corrections instead of connections, we can become overdrawn in our relationship with our kids. And so we find that we aren't connecting with them. They're not listening to us. They resent us talking with them because we are overdrawn. You've got to have something to draw on when you have a talk like this. Find the right time to have the conversation. The right time is usually not when they're playing video games, and it's not when they're upset with you about something. Pick a time when everyone's having a good time. And when you talk with them, be an example for them. Include yourself in the plan to create a better digital media sort of outlook for your family. Say, we've all been using our phones a lot, and I thought it would be really helpful if we used it less, including me. And I'd like to see what you think about that. And ask for their input. Sometimes you need professional help, like a therapist, to talk about this, but other times you can just do it. And oftentimes when you catch a child in the right moment, in a reasonable mood, they are very reasonable with what they would say is appropriate electronic limits, right? Now, when they're playing it, they want us to play all the rest of the night, right? But even the kids who have the biggest addictions that I've worked with, when I've asked them, what do you think is an appropriate amount of time to spend on a video game or social media for that matter, they give me a reasonable answer. It's not always what the parents want to hear, but it's a reasonable answer. They don't say 18 hours, even though they might do that if left to their own devices. If your child won't engage in a conversation with you at all, even when you approach it in an affiliative way, whatever, then it's not a digital media problem per se that you have, but a more general problem. It's just that the parent-child relationship needs a little work. And that's very common. It's okay. That topic is a little bit outside the scope of our talk today, But family therapy can be really helpful if you find that you just cannot talk to your child about anything. And Sasco, of course, we offer family therapy. I'm going to give you a link in a little bit that will give you some other ideas for how to really intervene in this kind of issue. A good rule of thumb for whether or not you're speaking to your child in an effective way about this or anything else is to imagine your own parent saying it to you when you were a kid. And does it make you feel closer to them, or does it push you away? Right. And if you can, imagine yourself hearing things like, "You're always on that phone," or "We need to set some ground rules," or "Glad you could join us, Stacy. Thank you for putting your phone down for a second," or "Could you put it down for 5 minutes and connect with your family, please?" All these kinds of things are we might mean them as connections, but they're actually corrections. They're withdrawals, and they can often lead to things being a little bit tense. Just some general rules for social media. Again, just a rule of thumb, not an absolute law of nature. Waiting until at least the 8th grade or age 13, if you can, to sort of introduce social media into a child's life is often helpful. Gives them a little bit of time to mature. Some of us would prefer if our children were 40 years old before they ever got onto social media, but this is the best we can do. They want a social life too, and it is true that a lot of child's social lives involve around the I was just looking at one of the comments here. There's also this idea of waiting longer, right? The idea that children have a little bit more context to manage what is often an essential part of connecting with friends and communicating with friends outside of school is really helpful. Of course, extra caution should be taken if you know your child has vulnerability factors. And again, a proactive conversation before your child makes a social media account of, here's the kind of things that you might see on social media. Like, we want to make sure that your child can handle it. Now, you can monitor your child's social media account, but I want you to really think about the pros and cons of this approach. If you don't tell them that you're watching their social media account, then they won't make a fake account to try to throw you off base, maybe, but they will have some difficulty with trusting you if you ever do introduce to them, like, "Hey, I saw something problematic you posted," and then there's this trust thing that comes off. So it's really tough. But open communication and education is best. Discuss it with your child in a non-pedantic, non-preachy kind of way. Why it's important to only post things that won't get them in trouble. Remind them that social media posts can be forever. When I talk about vulnerable children, that's a great question. We're talking about if you know that your child tends to be a little bit more socially immature, if they have a lot of social comparison issues, high levels of anxiety, or things like that seem to make them highly sensitive to criticism, or might be a little bit more aggressive toward other children. Like, these are all factors that would help you decide that maybe I could wait till they're 16 or something like that. And video games is, it's really the same kind of thing. Learn about what your child's playing, play it with them if you can, right? I know that, as parents, like, we're too busy, right? But if my child is going to play something extremely violent, I would like to be there with them rather than to have them experience that alone. Not necessarily saying, "Oh, this is wonderful, you're playing this," but to be able to talk about it with them, to be able to have proactive conversations about screen time, how much screen time to have, how to transition from screens. And it's very important not to over rely on these kind of methods of directly controlling children's gaming, like shut off the Wi-Fi now, or we're going to take your controller away. These can be useful when used sparingly, but they can lead to blistering resentment. I'm going to post this link later at the end of the talk as well, but just so you can maybe copy it down, tinyurl.com/SRC gaming. I believe this would be case sensitive SRC gaming. This was a talk that I gave with a colleague of mine, and the second half of the talk is all about what to do about managing screen time, both in the moment and in a kind of a broader context. General strategies, mentoring, not just monitoring what your kid's doing, but actually being an active mentor for them. Proactively inviting your child to discuss anything digital media related that they see. So the way that I started talking to my daughter when she started using the internet a few years ago was, sweetie, if you ever see anything online that is disturbing to you or makes you feel uncomfortable or scary, or please feel free. Please do bring it to me and mommy. We will not get you in trouble for anything that you've seen on the internet. We just want to talk about it. And I refresh that with her every year or so. And she goes, okay, yeah, I know. And she, she's not to the point yet where she's cynical. I believe that she would actually talk to me about it. Maybe if she were 15 or 16, it could be too late, right? And you'll have other ways of being proactive about these things with your child, but it's never too late to begin to break in there and to create an sort of an allyship around your child's media use. You want to make sure your child feels comfortable approaching you. You would not want to punish a child for looking up something that upset them, and then they don't come back to you again, right? Because now they're going to do it on the sly. So this is the kind of bottom line here. Digital media usage has its perils, but when you take a balanced approach to it, it can be managed and often very beneficial for connections within the family and outside of the family. There is the link again, and I have a few minutes to take some additional questions. Before I do, and you can throw them in the chat, or in a minute, I'm going to open it up if you want to just shout out. But a couple of comments that came up in the chat. One of you pointed out that social media accounts, social media companies do not allow user accounts for children who are under 13. That doesn't mean, of course, that children can't get those accounts early. And I'm sure there are plenty of parents who would be willing to, like, let's kind of fudge your birth date here so you can have this because I know all your friends have this. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing to do, or that you should be ashamed about it. Not at all. But I am saying that the data that we have shows that it's better to wait as long as possible, and there are reasons why they put these age limits in place. I want to see if there's anything else, any other questions. So, okay, and then the second one, the second question was about Roblox and Fortnite. So these are multiplayer games that are massively popular. They both have 13 plus we call it like suggested ratings. And there's a number of reasons for that. And I have to say that I'm not a hugely knowledgeable about either one of these, but I know a little bit because it's sort of in my professional kind of scope to know a little bit about these games. I've tried playing them both. I find them both not my cup of tea. Roblox, starting with Fortnite. Fortnite has what we call cartoon violence. There's shooting. It's not graphic, right? But there's this kind of violent thing where we're shooting people, where we're taking them out. There's this addictive hook to it, where you can obviously the addiction part that we just talked about, but also you can get more cosmetic items by paying money. And some children end up, taking a parent's credit card and spending thousands of dollars in these games. And so we wouldn't want that to be something that a very young person would, fall prey to. Roblox is different. Roblox is not a game, but a system, like an interface for creating your own games, or more commonly with most of our children playing games that other people have made. It is something you can play for free, but you can also pay to play. And a lot of times people will spend huge amounts of money in Roblox. And it can be very exploitative. The whole model of telling a child that you can make your own games and make money on them is exploitative because of, if you want to look up a little bit more and do your own research, the Roblox does not pay the children actual money. Oftentimes, they give it to them in the form of Robux. They're called the in-game currency, which is kind of like script. If anyone knows sort of about the old like labor practice of not paying people in real money, and so there's a whole lot of very sticky ethical questions about having children make games for you that you're not really paying them for, and then you're getting money from other children. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of ugly bits about Roblox. But there's also the creative side, and it helps kids learn sort of computer skills and all that too. So I'm again not making an overall pronouncement. Any other questions?
This is Kimberly Wheeler. One thing that I wanted to note that I think a statistic that really made me uneasy about Roblox, and that's one of the things that I'm here for, because my daughter, I'm trying to manage that within reason, because I feel like she's 9 years old and she, was kind of COVID had them go online. And so we're trying to unravel that and figure out how do we manage it then going forward, social, emotional, all that kind of stuff factoring in. But with Roblox, what I found a little bit disturbing is that 41 million people that access it, or is it 41%? No, 41 million, I'm sorry. Daily active users are 13 years or older. So the majority of users daily are over 13 years old, and they have the ability to potentially interact with your child. And that scares the heck out of me.
Absolutely. That doesn't surprise me a bit. And I think that, yes, is another reason why Common Sense Media would suggest being 13 and up when you play it. And the number of users of Roblox and the amount of money that this company makes is unbelievable. So, yeah.
29 million are under 13. So there's a lot of kids under 13 on it.
Wow. Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments or questions?
I actually have one more. So one thing I just wanted to ask. So with the monitoring, because there's so many things out there, I think like Bark is one of them, and different ways that you can manage it through third-party organizations. Do you recommend that? Because I know you said you want to have that kind of collaboration with your child and not feel like they're being, being monitored per se.
Right.
You also want to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to as a parent to make sure that you're protecting them to the extent that you can.
Yes, absolutely. There's the ideal world, and then there's the real world. And I think in an ideal world, yes, you're the relationship and the open bond you have with your child is the base of the pyramid, and that in and of itself is enough to make sure that your child is doing the right thing. And then in the real world, there's often all these other factors that get in the way of that kind of open communication that you would like to have. So what I would recommend would be to start off by still trying to have the basis of your sort of digital media controls be the relationship you have with your child, and the fact that your child would feel comfortable talking to you about things. That's just a good thing to have in parenting, right? And then when it comes to implementing a direct control method, then I would talk with them about it and make sure that they understand why it's in place. And they don't have to love it, right? But I would things go so much more easily if they are kind of grudgingly on board with the idea. To say, I know this, you're not going to love this idea, and I know that you're not going to agree with everything about it, but here's why we have these in place, and it's going to be in place. I would prefer not to be a policeman to you, and you can still come and talk to me with any concerns you have. But this will just be a way for me to keep you safe. And, in the end, I know what's going to happen is that a lot of times the parents who need to use those kinds of apps also happen to, have a child who's not as open with them, right? Or, who's more resistant to things like that. And then it becomes a power struggle. And again, it sort of speaks to a little bit of kind of repair work that can be done in the relationship. But yeah, I think that those are fine things to have in general. There's nothing wrong with them, especially if kids are able to sort of appreciate where it's coming from. I'd like to
trust but verify, but then I don't want to get to the point where I have to start using applications, and quite frankly, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, it's more more things you have to worry about in the end. I wanted to read this this quote that Denise submitted from Devora Heitner about Roblox. My kids stumbled on people having sex in Roblox. Anything that kids are playing on a public server, you have to assume could be hacked or that your kids can see problematic language. Keep the volume on and headphones off. Okay, so that's part of this idea of being aware of what's happening, you know. Yeah, we have time for one more if anyone has any last questions or comments. You can always feel free to reach out to us at Sasko River Center. My name is Dan Glass. And so if you were to go online and you have any questions for me specifically, go on to saskoriver.com and you can find our staff webpage and you could look me up and you could drop me a line if you had any questions or comments that you didn't want to, didn't have time to share today. Thank you all so much for coming. I hope you have a great day. And I hope that some of this was helpful for you. Bye, everyone.